This is not a time for money grab. This is not a time, to do whatever you can to keep the doors open. It is time to think about what is core mission and how do we fuel core mission? How do we put that at the forefront of all of our decisions that we're making? Because just taking any funding to continue operating can actually do more harm than good in the long run.
Welcome to Nonprofits Now, Leading Today, a new podcast that gives nonprofit leaders a playbook to tackle today's most pressing leadership challenges. In these tumultuous times, you want to make sure that you have somebody who is a financial expert on your speed dial, and today that's what we have. Aisha Benson heads the Nonprofit Finance Fund, and we're delighted to have her here to talk about some of the things that nonprofit leaders can do now to make sure that they have financial stability today and in the future. Aisha, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Stacy.
I want to start by talking about what's been going on with federal funding. We've absolutely seen some very dramatic moves in the kind of money that nonprofits count on. There are estimates that 60 to 80% of nonprofits could end up in the red if they are already recipients of federal funding. It's a pretty dire situation. And I'm curious, what are some of the steps that you think nonprofits that receive federal funds should be thinking about now?
So let me first say that the Urban Institute's data is stark, but it really speaks to the crucible moment that we are in. Nonprofit leaders are being faced with not only actual and threatened federal funding cuts, but also macroeconomic pressures like inflation, high interest rates, and uncertain economic policy. And these challenges don't just impact nonprofits, right? They impact everyone. They impact a growing need for support in communities. And so what I encourage leaders to do is to first engage with your leadership team, with your board, and with your staff. Help them to understand that there's a steady and increasing demand and that the organization must come to grips with the fact that decisions must be made in the face of uncertainty and with fewer resources. And as you engage, be honest, be transparent, have the tough conversations, and be robust in your analysis. This is the time to bring in your accountants, whether they be internal or external, your finance staff, to engage in financial analysis. You want to review your budgets, modify budgets where necessary. You want to engage in cash flow planning and scenario planning at this time. And I encourage you start with understanding of the full costs of your operation. So you want to factor in things like those unfunded costs. Those are the sweat equity that is necessary to get your program started and off the ground, to engage in relations with your clients, the impact measurement, the cost of fundraising or advocacy. Those things are not typically built into budgets. I would also recommend that leaders prioritize core operations. Really think about what is core mission. There are things that the organization may be engaged in that are nice to do or nice to have, but not critical to mission. And so I would evaluate what are some of the excess expenditures and cut those and really just invest in your core business model at this time. So that would be a second piece of advice on what leaders can do immediately. And the third that I'd like to focus on is really advocating for yourself and for your organization. This looks like contacting your grant makers, tell them what you're seeing, help them to understand that flexible long-term funding can be very helpful to your organization at this time. Remind them that during the pandemic, many funders loosened the restrictions on funding, opened up some of the restricted funding as general operating support, for example, and issued more multi-year funding. And then also reach out to your elected officials at the city, state, and federal government levels. Advocacy is so important right now. Tell them your stories. Use good impact data. What are the economic benefits and contributions of the work that you're doing? How are you really helping people through their challenges? So those compelling heartstring stories as well as the data are going to be very critical at this time.
Absolutely. Thank you for encouraging people to advocate, because I'm not sure that enough people understand the importance of some of this government aid and what a ripple effect it has. One of the things we're also trying to make sure nonprofits are doing as much as possible is getting ready for the fact that there are predictions of a global economic recession. And as you mentioned, it's not just the federal funding, but it's also inflation and other kinds of gyrations. Are there things that you want to recommend that people think about planning for the future of the fact that we could have a lot of economic jolts ahead?
Yes, I would encourage leaders to get real and to recognize that we can't assume that individuals are going to make up the shortfall in government funding, and philanthropy cannot make up the shortfall in government funding. However, if we bring more resources together, then we can continue to move our missions forward. So this is a time to really research new funding sources, to think about those that might be able to fill an immediate gap, but also those that might be available in the long term. And so diversification of revenue streams is a top priority for leaders right now. And I know that that sounds daunting, particularly for smaller organizations, more emerging organizations that haven't been operating for a long time. But again, I really encourage that you reach out to your peers and colleague organizations and learn from one another. I believe that people are incredibly gracious during this season as everyone is being impacted by the economic downturn and the threats and uncertainty that exist, particularly for nonprofit organizations. And so if you want to learn a little bit more about how to do fundraising from individuals, you tap into some of those organizations that have had success in that area. Build coalitions, because coalitions can help to broaden the base of support. Another thing that I would encourage is, as you're working with your board, think about how important it is to set up some legal protections right now. Boards are getting more active in supporting with fundraising efforts to help raise legal funds for nonprofits, or to tap into their networks to identify pro bono support. And really just doing research at this time on how to protect the organization and your missions.
Could you say a bit more about the legal issues? Because I think that's a little different than what we've had in other kinds of economic downturns. What should organizations be preparing for?
So the first thing is to understand the facts. There are a lot of rumors or misinformation going around that nonprofits' tax status could easily be pulled by an executive order, or that organizations will be sued because of certain language that they're using on their website. And so it's natural that fear, may take over, and leaders are rushing to make decisions that might adversely impact their ability to operate. And so it's important to do research, understand what the full implications are for threats against a nonprofit's 501c3 status, or how to protect the organization against investigation or lawsuits. So I encourage that leaders look into free resources, check the websites of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and other organizations so that you can be knowledgeable about where your real risks lie.
Are there common mistakes that people make that you hope they'll avoid today?
Yes, I would say the number one thing is making decisions without being fully informed. Fully informed by the data, fully informed by the financial analysis that's necessary to help the organization really understand where their risks lie and where their opportunities lie. And that also involves speaking with teams, right? Speaking with the teams who are impacted. Leaders don't always have a direct line of sight into how changes are impacting the organization or how clients on the ground are being impacted on a day-to-day basis. Another pitfall to avoid would be focusing too much on the current moment. And, if we can just get by this current year, if we can just get by even this quarter, we'll be okay. But we've got to do some long range planning and some big picture thinking, especially in times of uncertainty. And that becomes difficult because there are so many factors that you can't pin down. And that's why you need to have a number of scenarios. You have your best case, and you have a mid case, and you have worst case scenarios. And it might seem like a lot of work, but often it's just tweaking a few variables. And that really can help you think about how to make decisions that will ensure the sustainability of the organization, and really watch for mission drift at this time. This is not a time for money grab. This is not a time, to do whatever you can to keep the doors open. It is time to think about what is core mission and how do we fuel core mission? How do we put that at the forefront of all of our decisions that we're making? Because just taking any funding to continue operating can actually do more harm than good in the long run for your organization.
That's good advice always. One of the things that I think those of us who were leading during COVID, I was leading this organization through the Great Recession. It's easy to want to turn to some of the things that happened in the past and use that to guide us into the future. Is that a good playbook to look at or not so much?
I think it's a good place to start, but I think that we have to recognize that this is a unique moment. So it's probably important that we modify the playbook, that we leverage our learnings from those time periods, but don't make assumptions that what worked then will work now. One of the most stark realities is that we don't have the same federal government supports that we had in some of our former crises. The federal government was a backstop then and appropriated large sums of money to help with recovery. And now federal government resources are being drained. And this is a time also of extreme polarization, and polarization increases with economic decline. So it's really critical that nonprofit leaders factor all of this into their scenario planning and decision making.
You've mentioned the importance of getting your board involved and your executive team. If there are one or two things that you want to make sure people focus on, what would you say for both the executive team and then separately for the board?
So as a leader, the first thing you want to ask your team is, what are you seeing from your vantage point? Right? How is your specific area of work being impacted by the changes that are happening locally, regionally, globally? And to really listen and use that information to inform decision making in the direction that you want to take the organization. Definitely ask that same question of your boards who might be in related fields, and be able to sort of broaden your perspective on the challenges and the opportunities that are before you. And ask everyone, can we continue with our strategic plan? Can we continue in the direction that we're going, or do we have to pivot? Are there changes that we should be making? And it's really critical that you have these conversations with your board, because if you just have those conversations with your team and then you make changes, your board might not be in support of those changes.
Yes.
They may not approve the new direction that you want to go. So it's very important to involve them at the very beginning.
That's such good advice, and especially because many of them have tremendous ideas, and you also want to make sure there are never any surprises for the board. So I absolutely critical advice.
You never want to surprise your board.
No, that's I have that written on my desk. No surprises, and that's really for all things. A lot of these conversations are grueling and tough in these times. Everyone is very anxious. So one of the things we like to end every conversation with is our standing question is, what do you do to recharge in these times when things are so anxious? And it really is important to take a little bit of a break.
I really appreciate that question because this has just been a sustained period of burnout for nonprofit leaders, and any advice that can be given around recharging and refueling to keep going in the fight is important. For me, I need to take into consideration my full body, mind, and soul. So I tend to the mental, the physical, and the spiritual. On the mental level, it looks like sleep. I need sleep, that rest. I love to dance. I love to do aerobics. I love to go walking by the water. And I love to chase my grandchildren around. They're so much fun, and they really give me energy and life. And then spiritually, I get refreshed and recharged when I'm reading the Word, and when I'm in prayer and meditation, and when I'm in church and fellowship with my church family. And so all of those three things work together to keep me energized, to give me a renewed outlook on the day, and to help me bring enthusiasm into my work.
Aisha Benson, thank you for this conversation that certainly energized me to take a lot of the steps I know I need to do and will help our listeners tremendously. Thank you for all your guidance, and we enjoyed talking to you so much.
Thank you. I've enjoyed the conversation as well.